scholars, there would have been no racism because they helped create the belief system with authenticity. If a professor of biology says that Africans are inferior, if a professor of theology says it, it's different than having a man on the street say it. So we can actually, in tracing the history of racism, in other words, we don't have to speculate about this. There are many good books on the history of racism led by scholars in academic institutions. A good example would be the book by Alan Chase called The Legacy of Malthus. And there are many others. The Leopard Spots by Stanton. There are many books that study the seminal role that scholars have played in creating these images of Africans.
Once again, why did the slave master attempt to de-Africanize the African?
Well, it's very important. Anyone who studies the function of culture, what culture does for a group of people, knows that culture glues a group of people together so that you have group unity. So that in the for the slave master to be successful, he had to destroy group unity. And the best way that he could destroy group unity was to destroy that which held the group together, which was the group's own identity, way of life, historical memory, or, in short, to destroy the group's culture.
Why should a people 400 years physically removed from Africa be concerned about their Africanness?
For the same reason that I was trying to explain in terms of why the slave master chose to attack the culture of the slave. If the slave is to be liberated, the slave must affirm that culture, must go back, recapture, incorporate, use their own native cultural forms as the base for creating a brand new life.
Well, you know what Malcolm X, he quoted somebody one time saying, you know, I didn't leave anything in Africa. You know, I'm not an African.
That's true.
You know.
Yeah, he said, you say I haven't left anything in Africa. Mm-hmm. He says, why, you left your mind in Africa, which is true.
Okay.
Okay, let's take a look then at the next example would be a page out of a catalog called Johnson Catalog, where white actors, minstrels could get something that was called nigger makeup, and this was circulated all over the country, and for years, actually for almost 50 years, one of the most popular forms in entertainment in America was this minstrel. So here is a white actor, in this case Al Jolson, and we need to see the whole slide.
Okay.
Al Jolson, who is became very famous doing imitations of imitation black people, because these were not real black people. But you'll notice that he has burnt cork on his face, and he's done something to his hair, and then he becomes comic, and that gives him the opportunity to project an image of African people to other people. And so this is another example of the defamation of African people. Here's a contemporary example. This is Darky toothpaste that's sold by Colgate Palmolive company. It's sold in the Far East, and again, the exaggeration of black facial features, the business of ridicule and so forth, making fun of black people. You see that happening right now, and in fact, there's an article in the Atlanta Constitution showing the reaction of some groups to the fact that Colgate Palmolive company sold this stuff in the Far East. When they were asked about it, according to this news article, they said...
What year?
This would have been, I think it's 1986, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
They said, when asked about this, well, there's no black people over here anyway to see this, and it's not offensive to others, so we're going to go ahead and sell it. So the last word I had is still being sold.
James Baldwin has said that many times what you say about someone else says more about you than about that person. With this in mind, what was the commentary that whites were making about themselves when they blackened their faces?
Well, you know, there's a real interesting book called Blacking Up. And it really examines the psychology of white people who blacked up. Blacking up means putting on the burnt cork and doing minstrels. At one level, you could say it's creating entertainment and making fun of black people. But what this book talks about from firsthand interviews with people who used to do that was they actually had an identification with the black culture, sometimes with black people. And one person said they just didn't feel right until they got blacked up. They'd lay down at night and dream about blacking up. They'd have this in their dreams for days and days on end, and until they could actually get blacked up and begin to do the things that they thought black people did.
Oh, no. Are there strong Freudian implications for this, or what?
If I were a Freudian psychologist, I'd give you a Freudian explanation for it. But clearly it's something that needs to be studied as a behavioral phenomenon. You know, the idea of the psychological meaning that this has for whites, other than just simply making fun of black people. Some people treat it as just being mean, but there's much more to it than that.
Okay.
Okay, let's, here's another example. There are a few more. I'll just run through these because our interest is in some other things, but this is an example of postcards that used to be sent through the United States Mail. I have hundreds of these. This says, "A coon trees a possum in Dixie." So it's making fun of the black male. Sapolio. This is the use of the watermelon as a stereotype with black face in it, and this was an advertisement for soap.
And this is happening around what period?
Well, it happened up, and it's still happening, quite frankly, but you'd see most of these in the 20s, 30s, 40s, in the 50s, and even into the 60s. You'd see a lot of advertisements like these. Even now, you still see sold in stores the little man who holds the lantern outside for your lawn, you know, a little black figure who holds the lantern as a servant. This was a textbook that was used in the late 1800s. 10 Little Niggers, actually used in schools as a textbook.
In this country?
In this country, yes. It would be interesting to go through the pages of this textbook and see the stories, because they're even more objectionable than the title suggests, but we just don't have time to get into it. But again, if African American children have to rely on these images for understanding about who they are and where they have come from, then you can see that we are putting into the African American mind information that will distort reality.
So all of these images were designed to do what?
To defame black people, to, as you say, de-Africanize black people, to turn the African into something other than an African.
Okay.
For the purposes that we talked about a little earlier, to destroy the cultural base in order to destroy the political unity of the group.
Okay.
Okay, the question was asked in a magazine article some time ago, does television, because now we want, you know, you were asking earlier how long ago was this, and I indicated that these things continue to happen even in 1987. Does television have a secret formula for blacks? And we see the Jeffersons as one of the most popular programs on TV. And this is the picture that talks about what that formula is. It appears that on American television, virtually all of the programming that is done about black people is programming that is written by white people.